Hi. Well, it's a minute after, so I'll do a quick intro. Just wanted to say thanks, first of all. I'll introduce Dr. Balaga in a minute, but wanted to thank him before we even begin because this series that we're putting together is really something that he suggested and that he has done in at previous institutions. And it's been extremely well received by both faculty and students and people situated in the NIH space. So we were happy to support this effort and collaborate with his office and faculty affairs, specifically in the Jacobs School. Dr. Arrizabalaga has been with us for, Gustavo, what, 16 months now? 17?
16, 17, something like that. Who's counting?
I'm guessing because I knew that it was fall time at one point. But he came on. He's both a professor of microbiology and immunology, where he has a long and distinguished history in research, specifically with NIH. Has done very well in that space, not only for himself, but also in mentoring other early career people in that space. He also leads the Office of Faculty Affairs for the Jacobs School. And I can tell you that in the very short period of time that he's been with us, he has transformed that office in the way that it is responsive to faculty, supportive of faculty. And this is just a very good example of that. So we are happy to be partnering with him. So glad that he brought this series to us. Please keep your eyes open because there are more sessions to come on other topics, and I'll post what they are towards the end. With that said, Gustavo, thank you so much for being willing to do this. And we're excited to learn from you today.
Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and share. Do you see my title page, Jill? Okay.
Perfectly.
Well, thank you so much. Today we're gonna be focusing on NIH Ames page. I'm gonna start with a couple of points. One is that there's many ways of doing things. Some of you are very experienced at doing this. Thank you for thinking that you for letting me think that you might get something out of what I'm gonna tell you. But at the very least, sometimes in these things, you can sort of get a sense of how to think about writing these grants and also how to help others that are writing NIH related grants. So I been involved with grant writing coaching for about 12 years. I partner with Dr. McGee at Northwestern University and the National Research Mentoring Network and ran several coaching NIH grant writing coaching sessions through them, also through a NIH funded U grant that looked at different models of grant writing coaching. And also, I'm a grant writing, I actually direct a grant writing coaching program for the WMC. So that's what sort of brought me to this space in the past. And what we're gonna be doing today, we're gonna be talking about Ames pages in general, but one of the things that I would like to also do is sort of talking a little bit about how to think about the process of reading and evaluating so that that guides how we write. Okay. So when you think about writing a grant, there's a couple of things that you need to do. One is you need to demonstrate that what you're proposing is important and the logical next step, and that you know what you're doing and that you have the sort of resources and the know-how to achieve it. But another thing is that you need to make it easy for the reviewer to understand so that they can evaluate it and they can also advocate for your proposal. And that's really important and just as critical as demonstrating that your research is the coolest thing in the world and that you're the right person to do it. You can do that. You can have that and not explain it well, and then sort of not go very far. So the making it easy for the reviewer to understand is fairly critical. So that brings to this sort of framework that Dr. McGee kind of developed with others and that I've been working with for a while is that to start thinking about the process of reading as a neurocognitive exercise, right? Your brain is engaged when it's writing, and it's also engaged when it's reading, right? And your brain is doing certain things while it reads, right? When you read a paragraph, your brain is already ahead of you, thinking about what the next paragraph might be. When your brain reads something that's very concept heavy, it's trying to grab on what are the important things that I need to remember. If you give me something in bold, my brain is gonna think, oh, this is really important. I'm gonna have to memorize this, right? So your brain is engaged in a certain way when it's reading. And I challenge you to the next time that you read something to think about what your brain is doing, because that's what the reviewer of your grant is going to be doing while they read it. Okay. And we can write to that. Also, the other part of this framework is that reviewers' behavior are very influenced by the community that they're part of, right? And this brings to this concept, and this is a sociology concept of community of practice. And this came from an anthropologist, Dr. Leib, and educational theorist, Etienne Wenger. And they came up with this concept of community of practices, which are groups that share sort of a goal and learn how to work together towards those goals. And they basically have a shared interest and a shared understanding of what being competent is, and they interact with each other to achieve those goals. This comes with good things and bad things, right? But to understand that certain things are community groups, then there's consequences in terms of the memberships, right? The legitimacy of those that are coming new into that is going to determine by perceived concepts of what competence means in that particular group. And different rules may apply to different types of group members that come in. And the practices are drawn and reflect on power structures that sort of in the bigger society and group. So why do we bring this in? Because the fact is that we have community practices in science, right? Think about your department. That's a community of practice. Your lab might be a community of practice, right? You do things in a certain way, right? We talk about the secret handshake, right? That's what being in a community of practices mean, right? So uh, the challenges for newcomers into this into community of practices is that sometimes the practices and rules are invisible, right? For those of you that are here that are new, sort of new faculty or postdocs or early stage, whatever you are, you know about this. The fact that there seem to be rules that everybody knows but you, right? And when I was starting as a faculty, the fact is that the philosophy was that you learn by trying and failing. We understand that that's not very productive. So that's why we do a lot more mentoring and a lot more training, because these things are learnable. Okay. And in terms of some strategies to lessen this marginalization of newcomers, uh, is this idea of making the invisible visible and providing key insider knowledge and guidance, sort of mentoring and coaching. And that's why talking to people that are part of the community of practices and being part of the community of practices that you either belong or that you have to be evaluated by is very critical. And this, why am I talking about all these sort of sociology stuff, is because grant review panels are perfect examples of operationalized communities of practice, right? These are members are highly conserved and reinforce expectations of what makes being a member legitimate and what a good grant is, right? So that's very solid, right? And those are the people that you need to convince that your grant is a good grant, right? So understanding that they're a community of practice can help you sort of work towards writing for that community of practices, and also emphasizes how critical it is that you talk to people that have been part of study sessions, that have familiarity with study sessions, in terms of sort of, and even getting people that have been study sessions reading your grants, because they can give you a sense of what is it that they're going to be looking for. So again, I'm emphasizing this idea that understanding the review process and knowing your reviewers is very critical about how you're going to write your grant, right? So we write for the reviewers. We're not writing for your department chair or your collaborator or the people in your lab. You're writing for the reviewers at the end of the day when it comes to a grant. So you need to understand what the reviewers are used to seeing, what they want to see, the criteria that they're using to judge what they read, and their likely approaches to the task, right? One of the challenges in writing grants, obviously, is that there are different types of reviewers. There will be experts that know as much or more about the topic than you do. But there also will be non-experts or people that are sort of adjacent to your field, but not in your field. And there will also be reading and evaluating your grant, right? There will be technical experts. Sometimes I've been in study sessions where a fourth reviewer is brought in because there's a particular part of the grant that is very technically specialized and requires somebody to look at that part of it. Okay, so you need to know that you're writing to all of these people, not just for the expert, and that's extremely challenging. So also consider how your grant will be read, right? Talk to people that have been in study session and ask them how do they go about reading grants, right? Because again, that should tell you how to write for them. So in most cases, your grant will be one of 9 or 10, and it's becoming more as study sessions become smaller, that each of 3 reviewers will read. Okay, so they're reading several grants. Many reviewers, I will tell you, I personally print proposals to read them, because then I can read them as I move around, as I go from one thing to the other, if I'm in different places. So that's an important thing to know. So if people are going to be reading it in paper, when you're looking at your grant and your figure looks awesome at 175% in your screen, that might not be the case in a piece of paper, right? So you need to understand how is it that a reviewer is going to read. So if they're going to read in the paper, you make sure that figures are readable in a paper. Okay? In many cases, the reading is interrupted. Think about when you're trying to read something, right? And it's not done in one sitting, right? So what does that mean? That means that you are going to have to write in a way that if I read 3 pages now and 3 pages later, that it will be really easy to sort of come back to it. Some reviewers, and this is from personal experience talking to other reviewers, they read aims pages of every grant that they're supposed to evaluate, and then they prioritize. Okay, these are the 3 best ones that I have in mind, and I'm gonna put the most time into those, right? Just from the aims page, right? Also, not all reviewers, as I said in the past, will be experts. So again, trying to reframe things in terms of this is for the reviewer. You need to make it easy for them. So when you start writing, that's what we're going to try to do. So how do you make it easier for the reviewer? So you switch your perspective from writer to reader, right? You get a lot of people to read it, because then that's how you know how it's read and how people are perceiving what you're writing. Think about reading as a cognitive exercise. What is the brain doing, thinking while they're reading for the first time? And for the first time is really critical, because many times they're gonna read it only once, right? And if I have to reread something to understand what it is, that's making me work more than probably I want to when I have 8 others to read. Okay? Use keywords for the items that the reviewers has to evaluate. They're going to be looking for your hypothesis. They're going to have to look for your significance. They're going to look for the gap in knowledge or the challenge that you're trying to overcome. They're going to be looking for a scientific rationale. If you use those terms, then I know where to find them, right? So I think that the what I'm trying to say here is that using keywords for things that they have to evaluate. And that's why you need to understand the evaluative criteria. And something that sometimes we don't do is to keep it simple, right? We try to prove that we know everything and we overcomplicate things. And that sometimes sort of comes at the cost of the reviewer understanding what we're trying to see. Even people that are extreme experts in your field, they appreciate simplicity, because the simpler that you explain it to them, the simpler that they can explain it to their colleagues in the study session to convince them that this is a thing too fun. So this is probably very well-known stuff for you guys, but just to sort of level playing field here, some key elements of effective writing style: spare, clear, and direct style, concise and precise, basically short sentences, to the point, logical flow of ideas, right? You want to guide your reader through your story. Using funneling of ideas to organize your paragraphs from broad to narrow. A last sentence of a paragraph connecting to the next. That seems very simple. We learned that in primary school, but sometimes we forget. And that's partly because the brain, as we came out of a paragraph, our brain starts thinking about what the next paragraph is going to be. And if it's not, that's jarring. And it's just, then I'm like disconcerted and I don't know what things are about. Okay. Consistent terminology. This is a concept of echo words. And this, I do this a lot with graduate students and early stage writers, scientific writers. I need to re-educate them, because in high school and even in college we learn, oh, don't use the same word many times. Change it up, right? Make it interesting. Don't do that. Keep your terminology consistent. For instance, you can say mutant knockout, delta CK1. They're all the same thing. So call it the same thing. Call it knockout or call it mutant, but do that all throughout. The reason is that if my brain sees a concept and then sees a different term, it's trying to figure out, are these two different things or the same, right? You want to make it simple for the reader. So use the same term. Things like, for instance, tissue, specimen, sample. They're all the same thing. Yeah, it makes it nice that you're changing the theme, the word, but why? You're making it harder for the reader to understand that these are all the same thing. So say specimen all throughout, okay? Readable sentences, all to new, light to heavy. Light to heavy, the closer the verb is to the beginning of the sentence, the better. We learned that and we forgot, right? But it really helps the reader. Old concepts to new concepts. If you start a sentence with a new concept that has not been brought up before, I'm trying to figure out what that is before I get to sort of, oh, it's this, right? Because, oh, you told me you ended up the last sentence with tissue, and then tissue is the last word of this second sentence, and that's how they're connected. Well, why don't you flip the sentence? And yes, it's okay to end this sentence with tissue and start the next one with tissue. It actually, while it sounds funny, it makes it easier on the brain. Okay, it kind of interconnects things. Again, these are very basic things, but sometimes we get away from these basic things because we think they're too basic. And we think that we might bore the readers. Again, the goal here is to make it easier. So let's talk a little bit then about Ames pages. So Ames pages is a very important page. Many people will say that it's the most important page. I tend to agree with that. Not only from the reading perspective and the evaluating perspective, but even from the writing perspective is very important, because it's the guide for the rest of your grant, right? This is a one-page synopsis of what your full grant is. So if you have a very solid page it makes your writing a lot easier. And this is why a lot of people tend to write that aims page first and have it really narrow, sort of um, nailed down before they really go and dive into the full proposal. Also, focusing on that aims page and trying to write it can give you a sense of what the holes are in your project. Oh, I do actually need this preliminary data for me to be able to say this, right? So that's one of the also it's not just important for evaluating, but it can be very important for your writing. This is one of the aspects of NIH grants that hasn't really changed, right? I don't know how many times in my career has the bio sketch changed, right? And it keeps changing. The aims page hasn't changed in my career. And when I talk to people that have been doing this for longer, it hasn't changed either. So this is, again, when we think about community of practices and sort of how people sort of expect grants to look like, the aims page has a very particular way that people expect it to look and to do. Okay. So ideas must flow very and lead to your hypothesis, right? Or your central question. What's the problem? What's known? What's the knowledge gap? What are your questions, hypothesis model to test? And how would you do it? So those are the things that need to be sort of conveyed in this one page. That's a heavy lift and heavy task. This is one of the most difficult sections to write. It took me many years to learn how to write it. I became better once I started reading a lot of grants and evaluating grants and seeing how other people evaluating grants. Again, sort of shifting from the writer to the reader really helped me uh, get better at writing these aims pages. So because it's one of the most difficult sessions to write, it takes the longest and you require the most input, right? So as soon as you have an aims page, get people to read it. Get experts, get non-experts, get even non-scientists. The more people that read it, the more feedback you're going to have. Especially people that are not experts going to give you feedback into that, how are they reading it and how they're sort of understanding it and whether it flows and whether it makes sense to them and what things are not clear. There's things that there's two questions that are really critical to address in a grant proposal and in the specific aims page. Okay. And these are things that I hear the leaders of the study session say to us all the time when we evaluate grants. Should it be done? Can it be done? Okay. Should it be done? Can it be done? If I write a grant and read a grant and the question and I don't have a solid yes to both of these questions, not one or the other, but both of these questions, that grant is not going to fare as well. Okay, so should it be done? Right? Is this significant enough? Does it move the field forward enough? Is it the logical step, right? Is there a good foundation that this is really the next step for the field or for your project? Those are things that answer that should be done. Can it be done? Are you an expert in the field? You have a track record in the field. You have all the collaborators that you need for the project. Do you have the resources? Are the methods and the approaches the right ones to answer the question that apparently should be done, right? So if you use these as sort of like guidelines for your writing, you're gonna be okay, right? So make sure that you convince the reader that this should be done and that it can be done. So let's go back to aims page. So one of the things that I like to say is that after I come out of an aims page, when I read an aims page once, and I emphasize this once part, the reviewer should know what your grant is about, what is your question, what's your hypothesis, what is this about, right? Why is it important? Again, the should it be done? And how is it that you're doing? How you're addressing the question in general terms, right? Not microliters of this or that, but what is the general approach? So what, why, and how? Okay. So those things, I need to have a good sense of what that is before I go to the rest of the grants from just reading the aims page. Many people, and when I've read really good written grants, one of the things that I always see in in a in the in space in particular, but the full proposal is that the question and the hypothesis or the hypothesis are sort of the guiding star of the proposal, and that everything sort of seems to flow to it and flow from it, right? So that there's a central question that what is it's very clear, and everything else sort of goes towards it and supports it. Okay. So if you think about that, basically in looking at an aims page, it should be pretty simple. You have some preamble, you have that question, and then you have a way and you're going to achieve that, right? So that's why most aims pages, if not all, look the same. They have a couple of paragraphs that set things up. They have a hypothesis or central question, and they have aim one, aim two, aim three, or aim one, aim two, and then a general statement at the end. They all look very, very similar. Okay. Again, your research question at the middle, you have to funnel to it, and that usually is a general description of what the problem is, a background that might include your data, or your sort of your findings, then a definition of what is it that we don't know, how this leads to that grant, to that research question, and then from that, how you're going to approach it. So because of that, as I said, the general format is very formulaic. You have a one paragraph synopsis of the proposed research. Um, so you have the top half has sort of a couple, one or two paragraphs that's a funnel with steep sides, right? What I mean by that is that you're funneling from general to very specific very quickly, right? But you're doing it in a way that's easy to understand. There, you're going to frame what the problem is, what is important, what's known, what is your question or hypothesis, what the new information do you expect to uncover? And then typically you have a bulleted list of specific aims, specific one, two, three, and an impact statement at the end. Okay. So sorry for the multicolor page here. So this is a successful aims page that NIH posted on the website a few years ago. So there was a NIH funded project that basically gave a few successful AIM pages to actually a writing professor, um, and to look at patterns and to see whether they could sort of see whether there were particular patterns that good, strong AIMS pages that were successful showed. Um, and they basically dissected several of these pages, including this one. Okay. So I'm going to give you a second, just a minute to go through it. So just go ahead and read it. So as you finish that, and you probably already kind of guessed by the color coordinated text here, but what that highlights is different elements that are present here. So this particular aims page starts with a general context or significance, right? So it just basically gives you a big set of sort of a context. Okay, this is about innate immunity, right? Eukaryotic innate immunity. And then very quickly starts narrowing that context, right? So now we're starting to talk about PRRs and PAMs. One thing that I want to highlight that I like about this grant, look at how like the really heavy concepts, like the sort of terminologies, like for instance, known as PAMs. Here, there's when they talk about first they talk about a particular gene, like known as the AVR proteins. These things are in parentheses as an aside. They're not made the bulk of the sentence, right? So again, that's to make it simple, to get the heavy stuff out of the sentence so that your brain doesn't have to focus so much on that, about that, okay? Because that's a new concept that might be unfamiliar. So think about how simple in some ways the text is here. So after the narrowing context, there's something about their particular contribution to the problem, and then there's a complication, which also can be referred to as a knowledge gap. Okay. Then they talk about a long-term goal. Again, they narrow that goal, and they go to hypothesis. After the hypothesis, they kind of tell us how they got there, how they got to that path to the hypothesis, summarizing their research, and then some additional research goal. I would just say that there's here stuff about their qualification. This is not something that I see in every Ames page. It's actually less common than more. I do see them more in training type grants like K awards. Um, but it's something that for some reason in this one it was part of. Now that we're moving towards team science, that's another thing that I'm starting to seeing a lot. Like, this is from a team that brings this and that and that. So these are elements that are present in this Ames pages. This is a second one. I'm not going to make you read it, but I'm going to highlight here that there's also patterns here. There's elements, right? There is, this one starts with a long-term goal, general context, general complication or knowledge gap. They narrow the context, they narrow that complication. They talk about their research and the path to the hypothesis, and that brings back to the down to the hypothesis. So when we look at these side to side, these are both successful R1 Ames pages. What you see is that there's no one order, but you see elements that are in both. Okay, we have knowledge gaps or complications. We have a path to the hypothesis, and this one is after the hypothesis, and the one is before. But what you can see is that there's sort of general elements that are present in both, that there is a beginning in general to a narrowing in both, right? And that all leads to that hypothesis, okay? So when we start seeing the common things, right? So both have all these same elements. They have this general context, the big picture. They have a narrowing context, the specific problem that you're trying to tackle. They have your research contribution, that path to the hypothesis. They have knowledge gap or complication. They talk about a long-term goal. They talk about a specific goal of this particular project. And again, sort of this hypothesis and the path towards it. Okay, so those elements were in both. How you put them together is going to be up to you, and it should be guided by what's the easiest thing to read and to convey what you're trying to say. So after those one or two paragraphs that convey all of this, and again, that's a heavy task. I'm just want to, acknowledge that this is not easily done, you list your aims. We will achieve this by the following aims, aim 1, 2, and 3. So this usually what reviewers are used to seeing is bulleted aims. Aim 1, each have a concise and specific title. Strong verbs are good. I'm going to determine, I'm going to identify things like explore, a little bit weaker, right? I'm going to give you $1 million. I want you to be specific. One thing that also helps the reader is the fact that they're consistent between each other. Usually, those aims will have very common content that it includes is a rationale for the aim, a sub-hypothesis, that a hypothesis for that particular aim, a very, very, very general approach. What is a general approach that you're going to do, and what's going to come out of it? Okay. The key thing is that it's really good if you do something for aim 1 in that aims page. It's good if it's the same thing is done for aim 2, in terms of sort of how it's written, right? And I'll show you examples of that in a second. Another thing that's critical to know is that when you title your aims in the aims page, make sure that that's the same title that you use in your research approach. Don't change it. Just like the central hypothesis. I see this sometimes when the central hypothesis is on the aims page, and then I go to the research approach and they talk about the hypothesis and it's written in a different way. And you might think it's the same thing. Don't do that. Keep it consistent. Again, my brain, you want to make it easy for my brain. So here's an example. This is that grant that you guys were the aims page that you read. This is what the specific aims for that one look like. Okay. Again, they're very basic. The one thing that these don't include is kind of an approach of how they're going to do it, which I like to see, but again, it depends on your grant. But what you see here is that they each will here determine, identify, analyze, so very specific things that they're going to do. And then our working hypothesis, our working hypothesis, our working hypothesis, consistency, right? I see sometimes grants where there's our working hypothesis in aim 1 and then aim 2 and 3 don't have one. Again, that's okay, but my brain was gonna look for one because I got used to it. I like this, so I want to see the same thing here, right? Again, consistency. This is this is not because I think it's a great grant. It's just it happens to be an example for what I want to do. It's something I wrote. It was funded, so that's okay. But what I want to emphasize here, I don't want you to necessarily read it, but that here's aim 1, here's aim 2, aim 3. But what you will see here is that, again, consistency in content. We hypothesize, specifically we will determine, right? So what we hypothesize, how we will do it. Aim 2, same thing. We hypothesize, we will perform, right? So we hypothesize how we will do it. Aim 3, same thing. We hypothesize, accordingly we will compare how we will do it, okay? So again, a consistency between those 3 aims as is written. It's very common after those to have a concluding paragraph, and it's usually a sentence or two, that basically talks about what is the outcome. At the end of all this, what is it that I'm going to get, and what is the impact, right? What's the deliverable, and why is this? What's the impact to the field, to patients, to clinical care, whatever it is that you're trying to tackle. A couple of common pitfalls that I've seen and that others have conveyed to me. Straight into the weeds, right? Again, instead of starting with a very general context, you start like in a very, very narrow context, right? Because you think everybody's an expert, so I'm gonna start there. I'm gonna impress them at the very, very beginning with the first sentence, and I don't know whether you talk about humans, mice, or cancer, or atherosclerosis. I mean, it's just you just drop me in the middle of the forest, and I just don't know where I am, right? So that's actually fairly common pitfall. I'll be able to get out of it, but why make the reader do that? No logical flat flow back and forth between topics, too much information. This is not unusual. At the beginning of my career, I used to do that. I wanted to impress people that I knew everything in the field. So I just basically tried to put as many facts in that first page as possible. Again, the least, the better. Whatever, just put in what they need to know for that to understand that aims page. Too many abbreviations. Your field has abbreviation. Not everybody's going to understand those. You give me an abbreviation, my brain is going to think it's important. I'm going to have to memorize it. My brain is not going to be very good at doing that. I'm going to have to be going back and forth. Again, the least amounts of abbreviation, the better. Unclear differentiation between what has been done and what will be done. And this is actually fairly common for when I see early stage faculty grants. Again, because there's this emphasis in trying to show, look at all what I've done. And then what you propose doing sounds kind of like a repeat. Okay. So you have to really differentiate between what you've done and what will be done. And that's where that complication or knowledge gap is very handy, right? Because when that really separates what has been done, what will be done, sort of clearly articulating what is it that it's not known. Aims that do not align with a hypothesis or stated knowledge gap. And again, another one is like, you're gonna do all this stuff, and it seems like you're gonna have a whole bunch of Excel sheets with data, but I don't understand what it all means, right? So the unclear outcomes. So these are fairly common pitfalls in specific aims page. A couple of resources before I finish. And these are all links, and I will share these slides, and Jill can distribute them, or you can email me and I'll send them to you. The Climb program at Northwestern made videos. Actually, the writing professor that analyzed those aims pages made videos analyzing those pages and talking about it. And so those videos are very useful. Also, NIH has a grant writing for success video that's fairly useful as well. For you out there in the audience that are early stage reviewers, early career faculty, the NIH has a early career reviewer program. Once you've written an R1 or a major grant and gotten the reviews back, you can apply for this program. And what it does is that it invites new investigators, new career investigators, to be reviewers in NIH study session. This is very useful. They usually treat you very nicely. They give you 1 or 2 grants, but you see how study session runs. So this is very useful resource and program. So if you are early stage and you have written an R1 and gotten reviews and want to see what study session is like, this is a really good program. I'm gonna finish here and take any questions. And I know that there's some experienced people on the call, so feel free to share any insight also if you want. This is not, again, as I said, there's many ways of doing things, and the more knowledge we share, the better.
Gustavo, I have to say there are a lot of people on the call that jumped on for this, frankly. So normally, if anybody would like to put a question in the chat or just raise your hand and turn your mic on, that's fine too.
Yeah, I hadn't seen how many people there were. I just ceased too.
Yeah,
Great.
yeah,
This
there were a
makes me
couple
happy.
that jumped on. Any questions for Dr. Arrizabalaga? Okay. Um, we always, for those of you that are on and do have colleagues who were unable to join, we always post these sessions and the recordings to our Health Sciences YouTube channel. Dr. Dolph is leading in the hits on our YouTube channel right now because of her excellent tutorial on moving to Science CV. If you haven't seen it and you have an NIH submission coming up, I would encourage you to go watch the video and do that. And we've also sent around some instructions. It's not the easiest thing, go figure. But Gustavo, thank you so much. And I should have mentioned at the beginning of this, I had run your history in NIH Reporter that I forgot to mention, but Gustavo has been funded on more than 50 projects through NIH over the course of his career, either as a lead investigator or a co-investigator or a dual MPI. So pretty impressive stuff. But thank you for the presentation. I think it was terrific. And we're excited for the next session, which in this is on April 7th. Dr. Arrizabalaga will be joining us again, and then we have other panelists who will speak on demystifying the review panel process. He'll give you more insights into what he's seen on, behind the closed door. So, Gustavo, thank you so much for doing this. The presentation was awesome.
Do we still have a little bit of time, or are we done?
Oh, sure, yeah.
I just want to, Kristen, Dr. Cohen just put a question that I want to address. So how do you see the impact statement differing from R21 that is more exploratory from an R01 since it is higher risk? I think you have to adapt to the mechanism for sure. What I would say in terms of when I talk about sort of that impact statement, it's just what is it that's going to come out, right? That's the key thing to get a sense, because you've gone through all these three aims and you kind of have each one is sort of independent from each other, right? So how do you tie it all together, right? What is it at the end of the day that comes out? That's what I mean by impact, right? And yes, for an R21 is going to be different than for R1 because one is more exploratory. Also, it's 2 years versus 5, right? So that there's more limited of scope. But it's more sort of how you wrap it all together. How is it going to come all together at the end to address that either knowledge gap or question that you framed at the beginning?